Doing the
rotate
podcast. And
rotate yours so we can see more of you.
so I'm Ashlynn. I am the betrayed.
I'm Coby, the recovering addict.
And I'm Brandon, the expert.
And today we're going to be talking about denial. And this is a two-part series. And so we're going to just go ahead and get started. We can answer questions after if you leave them in the comments below.
All right, so let's talk about addiction's best buddy. This addiction can't exist without this. And so it's very important. So what we're going to talk about today is denial and why denial is essential for addiction to thrive and do well. And we'll break down different forms of denial. It's really helpful to understand what it is. Because once you see it, once you know it, then you can start catching yourself in it.
Oh man, that's the truth.
Yeah, and it's also not very fun to do that, but
that's also the truth.
Yeah. So first, let's talk about what it is. Okay, define it a little bit. So let me ask you guys, what's your understanding of what denial is?
That's a fair question. I don't know if I could give you like a clinical definition as much as I could give you like real life experience, so like an example.
What it looked like?
Yeah, what it looked like. I think maybe, Ashlynn, you're probably best suited to answer that question as it relates to me. How did you see denial show up for me?
One way was when he was choosing to go to 12-step, before we found specialized therapy, he'd come home and say, like, man, I'm really not that bad. Like, these guys are so much, like, into it, and I'm just not there, and so I feel pretty good. Like, I'm not that bad.
Yeah, there's guys that are way worse than me.
Right.
So there's two forms of denial there.
Okay.
This is my job all day, is picking out the denial. So what you were doing is you were minimizing your problem, and another thing you were doing is you were comparing. So you're making your problem out to be not as bad as it is. And then you were using like a pawn. You were using other people to say, well, look at that guy, therefore my stuff isn't that bad, right? And but let's back up just a little bit, okay? So what's the point of denial? Like, why do we do it? Everybody goes into denial, not just addicts. Everybody goes into denial.
If I'm going to try to answer that, I would say it's like the point of it is to keep me from feeling uncomfortable and from really facing like the pain of what it really means. Exactly.
So reality is uncomfortable. It's painful. You have some pain in your life. And what denial does is it makes you not face it. So it's a separation from reality. That's all denial is you're not in reality anymore. So you're not facing that reality. And we us human beings are very clever, and we have so many different forms of denial and ways that we can avoid this reality. And so and think about it. When you separate from reality, you can't do a couple of things. You can't connect to somebody in a real vulnerable way because that person isn't in reality. How do you connect to somebody who's not actually even there?
Totally.
You can't regulate your emotions because you're not facing the pain. You're not allowing yourself to feel. You're avoiding whatever it is, and so you can't stop and get mindful. The opposite of denial is mindfulness.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's just being in...
Makes a lot of sense, actually, because he's super mindful now. It's like the absolute opposite.
So and what you're noticing, Ashlynn, with him, and we'll talk about this maybe on the next episode, but you're noticing with him is that he's more grounded in reality. Yeah. And so you can connect to him now much more. So...
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Should we walk through some of the different forms of denial?
Yeah. So let's first start with what it is and looks like for maybe the impact or what it looks like for the betrayed, and then part two will be what it looks like and how it manifests.
Oh, you want to talk about the betrayed now?
Yeah,
I was going to talk about the addiction right now.
Sorry.
Yeah. Let's talk about what it looks like for the addiction.
Perfect.
Okay. What I would like to explain really quick is why you have to use denial for an addiction. Okay, so an addiction is when somebody is doing something that they don't want to do, but they're doing it anyways, basically, right?
Like completely.
Yeah.
Completely.
It's self-harm. It's they're numbing out in the short term. They're feeling good, but it's self-harm.
Yeah.
And
it's like I'm acting the way that I internally believe about myself. It's like my actions are in step with what my internal beliefs about
sure.
worthiness and
so your addiction is illustrating your shame, right?
Yeah, totally.
But nobody would intentionally decide to go just harm themselves and hurt themselves. True. I mean, I guess they would, but if they have a lot of shame. Mm-hmm. But what happens, like, I had a client, she's an alcoholic, and she was yellow because her cirrhosis was so bad, and she kept drinking. Well, how is that possible? Why would she take another drink when she could die with her next drink? Well, she can use denial to justify and say, look, it's not that big a deal if I take one more drink, even though it is that big a deal.
Yeah.
Or she can use denial to rationalize and say, you know what, it's a good reason. There's a good reason why I should take this other drink. And so denial allows somebody to justify hurting themselves. It allows somebody to justify hurting their family members. And there's that rationalization or that justification that says, look, it's okay for me to do a bad thing. Mm-hmm. It's a good idea for me to do something bad.
So would it fit in where, I hear this a lot, like it's a normal thing for humans to seek that connection or to look at porn or to whatever? Yes? No?
Well, okay, so
that's
an interesting question, Ashlynn, because that's true. It's a normal thing for humans to seek connection, mm-hmm. right?
Totally.
Now, if I took it to this place of, look, everybody looks at porn, so I might as well look at porn and masturbate. And now I'm using a form of denial called generalization. I'm generalizing out, saying everybody does it, so I might as well. And the reality is, and this is the reality that I'm escaping, is a lot of people might do it. Them doing it doesn't change the consequences of me doing it. And so I still have those consequences. I still have to deal with what is if I go out and do it.
Yeah.
So using them to justify doing it is denial.
Yeah.
Right? Do you hear it?
Yeah,
do you see it?
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
So, let's
just made it was like a little bit easier to like I said, to justify the idea of like, oh, everybody's doing this, I'll just do it. Or, you know what I mean? It's like, this is probably culturally normal. What's the harm?
Right.
Everyone else is doing it. Yeah, right. For sure.
So here's the thing. The opposite, or the audience, listen to this. This is the cure to addiction. Okay, I'm going to give you the cure.
Wow.
Get ready. So
I'm actually bracing right now.
It's rigorous honesty.
Yeah.
And it's rigorous honesty with others, but it's rigorous honesty with yourself. Mm-hmm. And if you're rigorously honest, then you're not in denial. You know what you're choosing. You know what the consequences are. You're facing it. You're owning it. And if you're not in denial, then you're not gonna use. You're not gonna be addicted.
True.
And oftentimes, I'm talking a lot today, but
okay.
Oftentimes, what was I gonna say? Oftentimes somebody doesn't even know how dishonest they are with themselves.
Oh,
yeah,
that's so me.
Right.
Well, you start to believe those.
It becomes my reality,
right?
It becomes how I operate.
It's your reality. You start to believe the denial. Mm-hmm. Somebody can sincerely be in denial. Like, look, really, this is how it is. They believe it wholeheartedly, mm-hmm. but they're in denial. They're not facing reality.
Totally.
And so how do you get out of denial? Let's talk about that and what that's like. Do you know, Coby?
I don't think I could. I don't think I could. I don't know. I don't think I could give you like the. I don't know.
So there's two things.
I might have done it, but I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I just didn't know how I did it, honestly.
Okay, you have done it. I've seen you do it in your work.
Okay.
There's two things. One, you educate yourself about what denial is.
Okay.
And so it's like when I...
Like knowing how... Are you saying like knowing how denial manifests for me personally? Is that what you mean?
Yes, and then in general, like for everybody.
Okay.
When you start to get educated about denial, you see it everywhere. Mm-hmm. We're all in denial.
It's like when you start noticing like a big black truck, it's all lifted. Because you like that, then you start seeing them everywhere.
Yeah.
Same thing. Like you start seeing denial.
That's denial.
Everywhere. Okay.
Yeah. So I teach about denial all the time, and I'm working in my groups to help guys get out of denial. And I told myself, look, I'm not going to eat out this week at all, right? And on the first day that I said no eating out, I was sitting in front of this massive burrito at a restaurant. And I'm looking at that burrito and I'm like, what in the world?
What's going on?
Yeah. And
That's so great.
And I thought, okay, how did I get myself here? Because the biggest issue to me isn't that I'm going to eat that burrito. It's that I allowed myself to justify going to be there. And what I told myself is, look, like, you're in your office all day long. You need to get out. It's good to go somewhere, right?
Treat yourself because you've been working really hard.
Treat myself. Do you hear all the justifications and rationalizations?
All I'm doing is like hearing, like, I'm reliving in my life all the years, literally all the years of like, I deserve this.
I deserve it. Their entitlement,
right?
there's a form of denial.
It's like, I've worked so hard, or this has been a crap week,
right.
You know, any number of things.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but see how helpful it is for me to sit there and know, look, this is what I did to trick myself to get myself here.
Yeah. So kind of snap out of it.
Yeah. So if an addict can start, if they're humble enough and rigorously honest enough, they can start to say, whoa, this is what I do.
Yeah.
My favorite forms of denial are comparing and minimizing and generalizing, and there's a bunch of forms of denial.
Totally.
And we won't get into all of them today, but if you can learn what they are and really understand that, then you can catch yourself in it.
Okay, so based upon what he just said, Ashlynn, tell me how you saw denial manifest in my life. Can you
Well,
recall?
the example I gave,
how else?
I don't know. That was like the easiest one I thought of. So
I think for me, just kind of connecting dots based on what you're saying, it was like oftentimes when I was out of town. Like, no, not oftentimes. Whenever I was out of town working,
which was a lot.
Which was a lot. I mean, I spent like 4 months of every year, like on one continent or another that wasn't my own.
So let me just say, already I can hear a form of denial, which is compartmentalization. So
interesting. Totally.
What you're doing is you're saying, when I'm home, I'm one guy. When I'm on the road, I'm another.
Yeah.
So I can compartmentalize my life and say, it's okay for me to live this way here and that way there.
That's exactly how I lived. That was exactly it. And I didn't want to be, it was easy to act out on the road because I didn't have Ashlynn close. And then when I was close and home, it was like, I don't want to get caught.
Right.
I was like in complete denial of the idea that I was living a double life.
Right.
And that road life couldn't take place at home.
Right.
And so when I was on the road, it was like, I'm going to just sit here on the TV.
Somehow the consequences didn't exist when you were in Europe on a business trip, right?
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely.
Denial. Yeah.
And that was a big thing for me. But then also while I was out there, after I would relapse, it was this constant ping pong match back and forth. It's like, what's the least? We have those technical issues too, you guys. It's all good. But it was also like, what's the least amount I can share with Ashlynn, right? And which is also minimization,
rigorous,
right?
Honestly.
It was like, what's the least amount I can say to indicate that I've had a hiccup or an issue or a mess up without going all the way into it or taking full responsibility. So, I mean, it was like I put on a denial hat, and that was just how I operated.
Yes.
Especially when I was on the road.
Yes.
For sure.
Yep. Yeah, you're describing denial.
When I would go to 12-step, it was the same kind of a thing. When I would get help, it was like, this isn't so bad. And in truth, because we didn't find any specialists, and we didn't have like adequate specialized help, what I would do in my mind is I would take a sliver of what was said by whatever therapist, general therapist, family, marriage, whatever, and I would use that to justify
everything else.
Yeah, totally.
Yes.
Like
pick apart something
exactly.
and like that fits what I need.
Take what you want, bits and pieces.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that was just, to me, that's just more manifestation of denial that just literally fueled more addictive behavior.
Yep. You're talking us through exactly how it works. And so, okay, the first step is becoming aware and educated of what denial looks like, and especially for you, what your denial really looks like.
What my denial narrative was like.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not as bad as anybody else. There's way worse people.
Right.
It's only when I'm gone on the road. I'm pretty good when I'm home. Like,
Right. Yeah.
Are those it? Because that was a lot. Of
You know,
what
I just went to Hawaii for a week and just ate junk food the whole time.
It's awesome.
And it was like,
Snow cones.
look, I'm on vacation. You know,
Yeah.
I can do this here. I can do whatever. Right?
Totally.
So it's helpful to catch yourself. Like certain things that you do, like just notice, own the consequences of it. If you want to eat a jelly donut, eat that jelly donut. Mm-hmm. But know why you're doing it and how it's gonna make you feel and what it's doing to your body. Not, I want to do this because I deserve it.
Totally.
It's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
That's all denial, right?
Wow.
So become aware and educated about what denial is.
Totally good.
The second thing that, and this is why you can't beat addiction on your own. The second thing that helps is have somebody notice it in you. So a good group, a good spouse who's supportive, a good sponsor, a good therapist will sniff it out and be willing to call you on your denial. And if you want recovery, then you'll be humble enough to listen. Mm-hmm. But what happens? Do you know what happens normally when somebody gets called out on their denial?
Defense?
It's battle. It's shame. It's like
Yes, that's it. You guys nailed it. It's defensiveness, battle, shame. It's awkward and uncomfortable because somebody's saying to you, "Look, you're lying. You're lying to yourself, and you're caught in that lie." And and also like you don't want to face the realities, and they're like, "Here's the realities. You're trying to avoid these realities.
Yeah.
Look, you're minimizing it. You're comparing. You're doing these things because you don't want to face what is, and this is what is."
Yeah.
And
that's interesting.
it's really uncomfortable.
Okay, so I want to identify one thing just that came to my head through this is as the addict in recovery, right? Looking back, I realized that this was like addiction for me was like my blanket. It was something that had been there since I was 7. It was always there for me. Mm-hmm. It was there for me when things were hard. It was there for me when things were great. But it was also the thing that betrayed me the most and like threw me under the bus and sabotaged me and caused the most angst and pain in my life. That said, in those moments like what you just described, like the idea of letting go of my blanket, my addiction, is so scary because life without it was
what is it?
Altogether foreign.
Yes.
And super, super scary.
Right.
Now I didn't realize that's what I was doing. But if you look at a kid who you're okay, you got like a 6-year-old. Okay, it's time to hang up the blanket, right? We need to get rid of this. It's like no, like think about how I was that kid where I fought my mom and letting go of my blanket when I was a kid, literally. And the same thing happened to me, metaphorically speaking, with my addiction.
When you're a 33-year-old man, and somebody's calling you out, and it's like, no, I don't want to give up that blanket.
It was even worse when I was 37, actually.
Yeah.
but just kind of like offering a little insight to that, like as far as like when shame and the defenses and the walls go up, it's like I didn't realize it, but I was fighting for the one thing that was quote unquote comfort for me when things were hard. But it was the source of all the destruction in my life.
So for me, I feel like that is when we would have those cycle fights of I would bring it up and he would minimalize and compare, and then I was the crazy one, and it was this. So we just wouldn't talk about it for a while, and then it would come back.
Right.
And I think that the trust issue that we had there was I think that's because I wasn't safe for you. And you weren't safe for me, and so when you would bring up that stuff, it was like you were like the mom ripping the blanket from me.
I wasn't the supportive spouse.
Right? And I think we're probably, correct us if we're wrong, we're probably more the norm than we are the exception in that relationship, right?
For sure.
Of the addicted being able to take from the betrayed, the truth of being called out with denial.
Oh yeah, for sure. And when if you call your spouse out in denial, you want to be careful with that. Yeah. And there needs to be a level of trust and safety in that relationship to be able to say, hey, like, this is what I'm seeing, or not. You don't want to get in this mode of like, there it is, there's your denial. See, that's just you in denial.
Is that us?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I want to make another point here, which is, addiction is an attachment disorder. Well, the attachment disorder, how it manifests itself is denial. You're detaching from reality, and so the spouse is trying to connect to somebody who's not connected, and not just not connected, but somebody who's constantly pushing them away, and
completely
and pushing away
unaware
from reality.
Of that's what they're doing, at least as a rule, anyways.
sometimes, I mean, sometimes they know they're pushing away on purpose because they don't want them close, and sometimes it's automatic, but they're not grounded in reality. And so the spouse of an addict, sex addiction, drug addiction, whatever addiction, can really feel crazy because they're trying to get connection in the relationship to somebody who's not able to connect.
And that denial
not connected
just
to
is
reality.
like wall after wall
Right.
of separation between the
So
betrayed.
that's part 2, right?
And that's what we're going to talk about next time.
Okay,
Yeah.
this is really good. So again, just real quick to make sure that I understand this, as far as what you're saying to remedy this, if you're the addicted listening to this, is I've got to educate myself, understand, just generally speaking, what falls underneath the umbrella of denial, and number 2, understand what denial looks like for me in my own life, and number 3, have help from a sponsor, a therapist, somebody that I trust, that I can be vulnerable with, to call me out and say, look, this is you're in denial right now.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
You know, in my groups yesterday, I ran.
Well, that's a really great place to do it.
That's what we do in group, is we create safety and connection so that we can get honest and vulnerable. That's, in a nutshell, that's what group is. And yesterday we had a kid who relapsed, and we didn't spend the time in the group talking about how, his tools of what to do not to relapse again. What we spent the time doing is really understanding the denial that he uses to get himself to relapse. So I mean, we could give him relapse prevention tools and all those things that are important, but what he really needed to see was, how am I getting myself here? How am I lying to myself? How am I justifying? And what he was using was, he was using, there's a really powerful form of denial called hopeless helpless. And that's just, I'm done. It's hopeless, so I might as well do whatever I want to do.
I think we call that a case of the F-its.
Yeah, we call it that too.
What's the point? F it. It's like, it's
F
all,
it.
yeah.
And it is powerful. When you get there, then you might as well do whatever you want to do.
Totally.
And it's denial, because hopelessness is always a lie. Things always move forward. And in addiction, and when you're in that depressed, hopeless state, you can justify anything.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so, but the point I was trying to make is his group, they love him, and they connected to him, and they said, look, this is what we're seeing, and so let's call you out on your denial so that you can see it too. And he was humble, and he listened, and I feel like he took it in, and hopefully he'll work on not being in denial.
That's awesome.
So
that's awesome. Ash, last word for you. Represent what it's like now to, as the betrayed, to actually have life without denial for me. Because this is important for those who are out there to have hope with what could be.
Right. Well, it seems impossible because we had 14 plus years of denial, and you more, 30 plus years. But now it's that honesty. If I ask a question, like I did this morning when we woke up, it's rigorous honesty and safety, and I have that trust in him now that I never thought was even possible.
Right.
But it's, how far into this have we gone?
Right.
And seeing actions every day of baby steps towards hope and progress.
But you're describing the foundation of a healthy relationship, one that's based in reality, so that you can trust him. If you can trust him, then you can get close to him. You can have intimacy. You can have the relationship that we all desire, right? But it has to start with rigorous honesty. And so that means it starts with you getting out of denial, right?
That's interesting. That's awesome. Cool.
All
right, guys. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Part 2 is coming up on the next episode, so pay attention to that. Also want to draw your attention to the website, The Betrayed Addicted Expert.
Yes.
And guys, we've got workshops that are coming up. Want you to take a look at that for
they will be both
schedule.
online and local.
Online and in person. We want to be able to reach people who are outside of our local vicinity, who can show up, because we realize that's actually pretty challenging. And I guess any others, as far as what's going to be there.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Go check out our workshop schedule.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Thanks for being here.
All
Thanks
right,
for being
we'll
with
see
us.
Bye-bye.